At 86, Tom Brokaw finally tells the truth about Savannah Guthrie, and what he revealed about her mother will make you look at this disappearance completely differently. It's Monday night, February 9th, 2026. The 5 p.m. ransom deadline in Tucson came and went 4 hours ago. No wallet address arrived, no proof of life photo, no new message, at least none that has been made public. The silence is deafening. And in the middle of that silence, something else happened today that almost no one saw coming. Tom Brokaw, 86 years old, the voice that defined network news for a generation, the man who anchored NBC nightly news through wars, elections, 9/11, and 5 different decades, broke a long personal silence. He did not do it on television. He did not do it in an interview. He did not write an op-ed. He spoke quietly and deliberately to a small group of former colleagues and longtime friends who gathered at his home in New York this afternoon. 8 people total. No press, no cameras, no recordings allowed. Just coffee, a few chairs pulled into a circle, and Tom, still sharp, still measured, finally saying what he has carried for years. One of those 8 people called me tonight at 7:14 p.m. Eastern and asked if I wanted to know what was said. I did. What follows is not rumor, not speculation, not anonymous sourcing dressed up as fact. This is what Tom Brokaw told those 8 people this afternoon, recounted to me in detail by someone who was sitting 3 feet away. And yes, it goes straight to the heart of why Savannah Guthrie is moving through this nightmare the way she is. Tom began without preamble. I've known Savannah since she was the new kid on the 4th floor at 30 Rock. She was 30, maybe 31. Hungry, polished, polite to a fault. But there was something else I noticed right away. Something I recognized because I'd seen it before in other people who grew up under a certain kind of parent. He paused. She carried her mother around with her like a second heartbeat. Not in a sentimental way, not in a call mom every Sunday way, in a mom is still in the control booth way. And I don't think most people understand how absolute that control has always been. Tom leaned forward slightly. Those who were there said he looked like he was delivering a story he had rehearsed in his head for a long time. Nancy Guthrie didn't raise 3 kids after her husband died by being soft. She raised them by being unbreakable. And she demanded the same from them, not cruelty, necessity. She believed the world would punish weakness, so she made damn sure her children never showed any. Savannah learned that lesson earlier and deeper than most children learn anything. He gave a specific memory that none of the 8 had heard before. When Savannah was offered the Today Show co-anchor chair, the biggest promotion of her career, she didn't call her agent first. She didn't call her husband first. She called Nancy. Tom said Savannah later told him the conversation. "Mom, they want me to co-anchor the Today Show." Nancy's reply, according to what Savannah shared, was, "That's fine, but don't let it go to your head and don't let them see you sweat. You're there to work, not to be liked." Tom looked around the room. She told me that story with pride. Pride, not resentment. She was proud that her mother had reminded her to stay grounded at the exact moment most people would be screaming with joy. That is the economy they've lived in since Savannah was a girl. Approval is granted for discipline, not for emotion. Love is proven through performance, not through need. He let that settle, then continued. Now watch what's happening this week. Watch how Savannah speaks to the camera. Watch how she structures every sentence. Thank the public. Describe her mother's character. Acknowledge the ransom reports. Then, and only then, make the direct plea. That is not instinct. That is trained. That is Nancy's choreography. Savannah is still executing the steps exactly the way she was taught. Never let them see panic. Never let them see desperation. Never let them see you lose control. Because control is the only currency that ever bought her mother's respect. One of the people asked, "Do you think Nancy would actually disapprove if Savannah fell apart on camera right now?" Tom didn't hesitate. "I think Nancy would be appalled. Not because she doesn't love her daughter. God knows she does. But because she spent 46 years teaching Savannah that the moment you let emotion take over, you lose. And Nancy never lost. Not when her husband died. Not when she raised 3 kids alone. Not when life kicked her in the teeth. She didn't cry in public. She didn't beg. She fixed it. And she expected the same from her children." He added something that felt almost painful to hear. "I've seen Savannah cry exactly twice in all the years I've known her. Once when she told me about her father-in-law's death. Once when she talked about her own daughters facing something hard. Both times she stopped herself within seconds. wiped her eyes, smiled, changed the subject. That isn't strength. That's conditioning. And right now, that conditioning is the only thing keeping her upright. And it's also the thing that might eventually crush her. Tom moved to the second video, the February 7th plea. When she said, "We will pay," I felt something turn in my stomach. Not because the words were wrong, they were necessary, but because of how she delivered them, like she was reading terms of surrender in a treaty negotiation. No tremor, no visible anguish, just clarity, resolve, dignity. He shook his head slowly. That is not how most daughters would sound when offering millions for their mother's life. That is how a soldier sounds when reporting to command. And Savannah is still reporting to command. Even when command is missing, even when command is in danger, even when command might be dying without her medication, the chain of command is still intact inside her head. And she is still following orders. Someone asked the question everyone was thinking. Do you believe she's going to be able to keep that up if this goes on another week? Another month? Tom's answer was quiet, but it landed hard. I don't know. I honestly don't know. She's already running on fumes. You can see it in her eyes in those videos. The light is dimming, but she won't let it go out. Not yet. Because letting it go out would mean admitting she can't fix this. And admitting she can't fix it would mean admitting she's failed her mother. And that is the one verdict she has spent her entire life trying to avoid. He told one more story, short but devastating. About 10 years ago, Savannah was going through a very difficult stretch personally. She never told me the details. But one morning she came in early, sat down next to me in the makeup room, and said almost in a whisper, "I called Mom last night. I told her I was struggling. She said, 'You've handled worse. Handle this.' So I'm handling it." Tom looked at each person in the room. She smiled when she said it. A small, tired smile. And then she went on air and interviewed a grieving parent like nothing had happened. That is who she is. That is who Nancy made her. And right now, that is who is trying to negotiate with a kidnapper, manage a national spotlight, comfort her own children, and keep breathing. All while believing that if she stops handling it perfectly, she loses the only love that ever mattered. Tom finished that part by saying something that felt like both a warning and a prayer. Savannah Guthrie is not just the co-anchor of the Today Show. She is not just a mother of two. She is not just the daughter of a missing 84-year-old woman. She is the living result of a parenting philosophy that said love is earned through invincibility. And right now she is trying to remain invincible for the one person who taught her that was the only way to be loved. He asked the group not to rush to social media with his name attached. Not yet. Let the investigation breathe. Let the deadline pass. Let the search continue. But when the time comes, when this is over one way or another, someone needs to tell the full story. Not the crime story. The human story. The story of a daughter who has spent 4 decades trying to prove she's worthy of the woman who raised her. He ended with one last sentence. And if Nancy comes home, I hope, God I hope, she finally tells her daughter she doesn't have to prove anything anymore. That was the heart of what Tom Brokaw shared this afternoon. No fanfare, no press conference, no headline grab. Just an 86-year-old man who has seen almost everything finally saying what he has watched for years. Savannah Guthrie is not only fighting to save her mother's life. She is fighting to preserve the only version of love she has ever known how to receive. And that fight is taking everything she has left. Tomorrow the clock keeps moving. The search keeps moving. The tips keep coming in. But tonight, wherever you are, take a moment. Look at those videos again. See the daughter who is still trying to get it right. See the woman who is still trying to make her mother proud. See the little girl who still believes that strength is the price of being loved. And say Nancy's name one more time. Because if she comes home, when she comes home, Savannah is going to need more than a safe return. She's going to need permission to finally lay down the armor she's worn since childhood. Tom Brokaw at 86 finally said it out loud so the rest of us could see it. Now it's our turn to carry it. Bring Nancy home. And when she does, let Savannah finally hear the words she's waited 46 years to hear. You don't have to be perfect anymore. You never did. Tom didn't rush to close the conversation after that first wave of memories. He stayed with it, letting the weight settle over the 8 people in the room. Then he shifted to something even more specific, something that made several of them sit forward in their chairs. I want you to think about the exact sequence of events since February 1st, he said. Not the sheriff's timeline. Not the ransom notes. The family's timeline. The public timeline. The one Savannah and her siblings have controlled. He laid it out point by point, slowly, like someone who has spent decades dissecting stories for a living. Sunday, February 1st. The day the house is found empty. The crime scene is declared. The sheriff goes on camera saying she was taken against her will. No statement from Savannah. Nothing. Monday. Search ramps up. FBI joins. National attention explodes. Still nothing from her. Tuesday. Ransom notes hit TMZ and local stations. The Bitcoin demands start circulating. Still no public word from Savannah or the siblings. Wednesday. Finally, the first video drops. But notice when it drops. Late Wednesday evening. Not Tuesday night. Not Wednesday morning. Late enough that it can be polished, rehearsed, vetted. Late enough that it comes after 3 full days of silence. Tom looked around. That delay is not accidental. That delay is Nancy. Savannah didn't speak until she could speak perfectly. Until she could thank people first. Until she could frame her mother as strong, faithful, light-filled. Until she could address the captor with dignity instead of desperation. That is not the instinct of most daughters in crisis. Most daughters would have been on Instagram at 12:01 a.m. Sunday night sobbing, "Please bring my mom back." Savannah waited. She waited until she could deliver a performance worthy of her mother's standards. He moved to the second video again. When "We will pay" came out of her mouth, I felt the room shift. Not because the offer itself was surprising. It had to be said. But because of the delivery. She looked straight into the lens and said those 4 words like she was closing a merger. No quiver. No pleading tone. No visible terror. Just calm, deliberate commitment. Tom shook his head slightly. That is not how human beings usually sound when they're offering their life savings to save someone they love. That is how a lawyer sounds when she's presenting final terms. That is how a commander sounds when she's giving an order she knows must be followed. And Savannah was giving an order to the captor. Yes, but also to herself. The order was stay in control. Do not break. Do not show weakness. Meet the expectation. One of the 8 asked the question hanging in the air. Do you think she's afraid that if she lets go, if she really lets go, Nancy would somehow know and be disappointed? Tom answered without pause. I think she's terrified of it. I think part of her still believes Nancy is watching. Even if Nancy is bound, even if she's in pain, even if she's barely conscious without her pills. Savannah believes there is still a grade being given. And the grade is, did you hold it together? Did you represent us well? Did you stay strong when everything was falling apart? He leaned back slightly. I've anchored through more crises than I can count. I've watched families collapse on camera. I've watched them scream, wail, collapse into each other. That's human. That's normal. Savannah has not done any of those things. Not once. She has thanked. She has described. She has pleaded with precision. She has offered to pay with dignity. Every single public moment has been controlled. And that control is not strength. That control is survival training from childhood. Tom then shared something that felt like the emotional center of the entire afternoon. About 15 years ago, Savannah had a very public professional stumble. A story she worked on didn't hold up under scrutiny. It wasn't entirely her fault, but her name was on it. For 2 weeks, she was everywhere defending, explaining, apologizing. I watched her do it with perfect poise, Tom said. Never once did she look rattled on air. After the worst of it passed, she came to his office one evening, closed the door, sat down, and let a few tears fall. Not many, just enough to acknowledge what it cost her. Then she wiped her eyes and said, I called Mom. I told her what happened. She said, you made a mistake. You fix mistakes. You don't wallow. So I'm fixing it. Tom's voice dropped. She wasn't asking for comfort. She was reporting progress. That is who is standing in front of cameras right now. That is who is saying, we will pay, while her mother is God knows where without her heart medication. He looked at each person again. She is carrying 2 burdens at once. One is the abduction of her mother. The other is the half-century-old expectation that she must never appear weak in front of the one person whose opinion has always mattered most. And right now she is terrified she is failing that second test. Someone asked quietly, what happens if Nancy doesn't come home? Tom paused longer than at any other point that afternoon. If Nancy doesn't come home, Savannah will not collapse the way most people collapse. She will not fall apart on camera. She will thank everyone who helped. She will speak at a memorial with perfect clarity. She will hug her children. She will go back to work. And she will carry the verdict inside her forever. That she was not good enough to bring her mother back. That she failed the final assignment. But if Nancy does come home, he said softly, I hope someone finally tells Savannah the truth. You don't have to earn this. You never had to earn this. You were enough the day you were born. You were enough right now. You don't have to perform anymore. Tom asked the group to hold what he'd said close, at least for now. When the time is right, he said, someone needs to tell the deeper story. The human cost. The cost to a daughter who has spent 46 years trying to be unbreakable for the woman who taught her that breaking was not allowed. He ended almost under his breath. And I hope when Nancy is safe again, she finally gives her daughter the only thing she's never known how to ask for. Permission to be human. That was the final arc of what Tom Brokaw shared that afternoon in a quiet living room with 8 trusted friends. No microphones. No lights. Just an 86-year-old journalist who has watched people under pressure for decades finally saying the truth he has carried for years. Savannah Guthrie is not only trying to bring her mother home. She is trying to preserve the only version of love she has ever been taught to value. The version that says strength is the price of belonging. Tonight the desert outside Tucson is cold. The deadline has passed. The silence continues. But somewhere in that silence a daughter is still listening for her mother's voice. And when Nancy is found and returned, maybe then Savannah will finally hear the words she has waited her entire life to hear. You did enough. You always did enough. You can rest now.